Hello, everyone, and welcome to It's a Family Matter. And today, it really is a family matter. I'm Dr. Michael Blackwell, speaking with you today from the lovely and majestic Broyhill campus of the Baptist Children's Homes of North Carolina. And when I say it's a family matter, I mean it literally, because my special guest today is Jason Davis, who grew up right here at Broyhill Home. It's been a long time, Jason. Welcome to It's a Family Matter.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. Everything's going great. I'm just glad to be back here on campus. It's just so beautiful here, and as you said, it is quite majestic.
Well, it is. Now, you have shared your story with us several times in the past. We've written about you in Charity and Children. You have spoken at the Baptist State Convention. We'll talk about that. It was a long time ago. What brought you to Broyhill as a 10-year-old boy?
Well, Dr. Blackwell, I had a pretty rough start as a kid. My real father passed away when I was 5, and my mother didn't deal well with his passing and his sickness, and she got addicted to drugs and alcohol. She was stealing drugs from the hospital where she was a registered nurse, and she kind of went off the deep end on that, drinking, and then, of course, she started beating on me, and she would leave me home by myself for days at a time. I went from foster home to foster home back and forth for many years, between 5 and 10. But finally, I did manage to get placed with my grandmother, and my mother showed up at her house and almost beat my grandmother to death. And after that is when I came here to live at Broyhill.
Now, was that her mother or mother-in-law?
That was her mother-in-law.
Okay. So, physical abuse?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Beaten with belts, coat hangers, smacked, burned with cigarettes.
And how old were you been at the time?
5.
My goodness.
You know, my mom was married, I think, 5 times. Last time she was married to a guy that lived in a teepee out in California for about 10 years after Vietnam, and he ended up being back here in Haywood County with her, and I was placed back with them. I remember running away from that and calling the sheriff to come pick me up at a neighbor's house so that they wouldn't run with me out of the state. So I do remember that quite vividly. Of course, my grandparents on her side were still alive then, but they passed away after I moved out of Broyhill and went into the Air Force.
And your mom?
Passed away 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Did you have any reconciliation with her at all? Or, once the separation came, did it stay that way?
Well, I was an emancipated minor after coming to Broyhill, and then went to college. She would call the college and actually say that she was my mother calling, and that I was a bad child that wouldn't call her his own mother and all this stuff, which my freshman year, that did cause some concern by the upperclassmen down at the Citadel. They weren't a big fan of that until I told them what the real situation was. She passed away about 2 years ago here, living in the same trailer that was new when I was 5. Mm-hmm. There were holes in the floor. The door was held on with a mop handle, one working light, no working water, no toilet, no running water inside. They were emptying their waste into the creek next to the house. My
goodness. So there was the physical abuse. Was there verbal abuse?
Oh, yes, sir. She always tried to blame me for my father's death and passing, that it was my fault, and it was my fault that she lost her job at the hospital and this and that.
That's a lot of guilt to carry around.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. How did you eventually get rid of that?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with church and with what we get taught here at Broyhill. I'd always been a church-going kid from the time I was born. Basically, my grandmother and family made sure that I was always in church. And then, of course, at Broyhill, we have devotions every morning, prayer, going to do a lot of churches. I remember doing World Changers as a teenager here, going to that. I think being able to keep myself in Christ and keeping with the teachings that come from growing up here, I think that helps a lot.
Well, you mentioned earlier about your grandmother. Actually met her one time. Tell us a little bit about this very special lady.
Well, my grandmother's name was Edna Davis, and if it wasn't for her, I don't think I would have made it through my early childhood years. She was just an outstanding person and Christian. She was always good to me. She would do anything she could to help me as a kid. She promised my father when he was dying that as long as she had bread in her mouth, that I'd have bread in mine. And so she always did. A lot of times when my mother would be gone and I was in first grade, for example, I wouldn't see her for a week at a time. And when I didn't have any food in the house left to eat, I would call my grandmother and she would come and get me and take me back to her house and would go from there. So if it wasn't for her, it would have been a really hard life.
Yeah. So when did she pass?
She passed away my freshman year at the Citadel, so that would have
Right.
been in 97.
Right. That had to be traumatic. I mean, here's this significant adult in your life that basically saved your life.
Oh, yes, sir. It was quite traumatic. And we weren't really ready for it. Now, she was diabetic and she had been sick, but we weren't quite expecting it that early.
Yeah, yeah. You provided two of the greatest moments ever experienced at a meeting of the Baptist State Convention of North Carolina. I'll talk about 1995, and you can talk about the year 2000. Now, in 1995, I had almost 200 kids on stage with me in Winston-Salem. There were between 4,000 and 5,000 people present. You were a senior at the time at Tuscola High, and then the crowd zeroed in on you because you were talking about what you wanted to do. You were enthusiastic. You just electrified that group of people at that time, saying you wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. Now, you finally decided to go to the Citadel. So every 5 years in those days, we were able to come before the Baptist State Convention of North Carolina. This would be 2000, and it was our time to be front and center on the program that year. So what I'd like for you to do, we jump from 1995, when you electrified the crowd, to the year 2000. You take it from there and talk about what happened in the year 2000.
Well, Dr. Blackwell, you again asked me to attend, and I got clearance from the Citadel to wear my full dress uniform. I was a company commander down there, so I wore, it looks like a lot like the West Point uniforms, or a Civil War uniform with gray tops and the white bottoms with a sash and gold stripes. You kind of snuck me in. You said, what a great thing it would be if we could have Jason here with us today. And then, in fact, I was there that day, and you introduced me. And again, it electrified the crowd. I think the way you set it up and having me come out that way, I was able to thank all the folks at the Baptist State Convention for what they had done for me and helping me get through the Citadel. And it was just a great time. There were so many people there. It was big. It was a lot of folks.
Yeah, so you've been able to speak to two of the largest crowds we ever had. One was between 4,000 and 5,000, and then this other one was about 3,000 or 3,500. And I did kind of tease them along a little bit. I said, wouldn't it be great if he were here? But he wasn't able to get up here, and we're so sorry. But wait a minute. He is here, and you were back in the shadows. And so when you stepped out, I know one of my trustees, Sybil Stewart, was there, and she said, he's here. He's here. And everybody just stood and yelled and clapped and screamed. I mean, it was a moment that will linger in the minds of those who were there that day. And you played along beautifully. You said, Dr. Blackwell, I know what to do. And I said, that's my confident friend, Jason Davis. And it was truly, truly a moment. Well, you got a great family. I've met your wife. I've met your daughter. And bring us up to date about your family and what you're doing now.
Well, sir, I lived in China for 6 years after getting out of the Air Force, and my wife's name's Shadow. We got married in China, and we moved back here in 2013. I've got a 4-year-old daughter. Her name's Chloe. We live over in Fletcher, North Carolina, and I'm a sales manager at Auto Advantage, which is a car dealership over there on Hendersonville Road. I've been over there since 2013. I came there to buy a car and somehow got trapped into working there, and I've never left. Enjoy it so much. My wife and I are expecting another child. We're having another girl. Due date is January 11th, and we will be calling her Clara. So we'll have Clara and Chloe.
Okay. And by the time this airs, you will have just turned 41 yourself. I reminded you that was I was 41 when I became president of the Baptist Children's Homes, and your comment was, that's crazy. Well, it is crazy, and I'm still here, and I'm still having fun. I want you to talk a little bit about the fishing tournament that you had here. You stocked this lake here at Bro Hill with incredible fish, and then you had a fishing tournament. Tell us about that.
Yes, sir. I got with the owner of Auto Advantage, Mr. Kevin Geegan, and we decided to stock the fish into the pond. We put in 2,500 fish between catfish and brim. We did that about 2 months before the tournament, and we also got about $1,000 worth of fishing equipment for the kids, poles and rods and reels and spinners and all kinds of stuff, and brought it over here. Then, of course, we did want to have a fishing tournament. We set up first through third prize for biggest fish, most fish, and smallest fish, and then we had a cookout for all the kids and staff and our guys from work. It was a great day. I think the biggest fish caught was like almost 9-pound catfish or something. It was a great time. One girl, I think, caught like 32 fish. It was an outstanding day out on the lake there. Just a great time for everybody involved.
It was great. I appreciate your giving back. So that's where you are now, I think, in your life. You've learned a lot of lessons. You've worked hard. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you very, very much. I'm proud of you. We go a long, long way back. What words would you like to share with the children, with the young people in care, not just here at Broyhill, but all over the Baptist Children's Homes of North Carolina?
Well, one thing I want to say, Dr. Blackwell, I want to say thank you again for all that you did for me as a kid. As far as some lessons I'd like for kids here to learn, that's funny you ask that, because on the board behind you, I can see a lot of the stuff that I was taught as a kid here still being taught. I mean, you've got Jesus, hygiene, financial, work ethic, how to cope, social skills. I mean, all these things that are on the board right behind you that are clearly still being taught to the kids, I think that stuff is all worthwhile. The work ethic thing is a big thing that I feel like a lot of kids these days don't get. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Something else is to not take a victim's mentality. One of the things that I always like to say to people when they give me their story of how life treated them bad or how they didn't have this opportunity, I like to just stop them at the end and I say, and what have you done with it? What have you done to make that better for yourself? There's a lot of people in this world that are loving and willing to help and reach out to kids. I mean, I know that firsthand growing up here. I know that from a lot of places in my life. But the thing is, you have to want it for yourself. I see a lot of kids that grew up here that I'm friends with that have basically turned into the same situation that brought them here in the first place. They have become the abuser, or they repeat the cycle. And that's on them. That's not what their parents did to them. That's not anything that they've learned here. To me, it's kind of taking the lazy way out. Mm-hmm. It's not wanting to put in the work. BCH has provided many children, plenty of opportunities, plenty of great gifts, great ways to go. I mean, you would pay for college for most of the kids that would want to go, I would imagine. But not many of them take advantage of that. Again, I mentioned that it's so beautiful here on campus, and we kind of pass through it without noticing. Well, kind of life is that way. If you pass through all of your opportunities and your chances and you didn't take any of them, that kind of falls back on you. That's something that I think that I've learned here at Broyhill, is to appreciate what you're given, to take that and then make something of it. And then later in life, when you're able to, give it back. I think that's some life lessons that came from here as a small kid.
Yeah, and you've learned those lessons well, and you are giving back. So if I may say so, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. You are, Jason Davis, a true story of success. Thank you for this very, very special time. I'm Dr. Michael Blackwell with thanks to Jason. So long for now.
It's a Family Matter is a production of Baptist Children's Homes of North Carolina. To learn more, visit us at www.bchfamily.org. You can also find us on Facebook. Be sure to subscribe and share our podcast with a friend.